The gates of Vitebsk, a hole in the German front. The Eastern Front was huge, and German and Axis resources together were never enough to optimally defend the entirety of the line. As an example of this, and for 8 very long months, a 40-kilometer hole remained open into Army Group Center's rearguard. This hole was called by the Soviets as the Vitebsk or Suraj Gates. The German Operation Typhoon to capture Moscow failed, and the Soviets launched their winter offensive. The Soviet 3rd and 4th Shock Armies in the Kalinin Front, commanded by Yeremenko, attacked with the objective of recapturing the cities of Vitebsk and Orsha. The 3rd and 4th Soviet Shock Armies managed to capture Velish and advanced on a 40-kilometer wide and 250 kilometers deep front until they were stopped by the Germans and retreated behind the town of Suraj. After the battle, the territory liberated by the Soviets was 40 kilometers wide from Uzviati in the north to Velish in the south. This territory just happened to be between the areas of responsibility of Army Group North and Army Group Center. The land was composed mainly of dense forests and swamps, so this state of affairs was ideal for partisan activity. As the weeks and months passed, and the Germans did not seem to be very interested in deploying additional troops to man this front, the partisans therefore liberated village after village until they created their own 1,600 square kilometer partisan zone in the so-called Surashchina. Soviet sources claim that up to 200,000 people crossed to the unoccupied zone using the gates, and in reverse, the partisans were supplied using this same gap. The zones supplied also included the countries of Lithuania and Latvia. Previously, crossing this front line was associated with great risk, but now the danger had been greatly reduced. The Germans did not close the gate immediately for the various reasons I'm about to enumerate. They simply lacked the manpower after the end of Operation Barbarossa, Operation Typhoon, and the Soviet winter counteroffensive. This offensive had created many pockets of surrounded German soldiers from Vyazma to Rzhev, including the large cauldron of Demyansk and the city of Holm. The absolute infernal logistics of this area, which was mainly forest and swamp, would soon turn the mud quagmires in the 1942 spring Rasputitsa. Also, neither Army Group North nor Army Group Center wanted to take responsibility for this area that only had one good road along the Divina River to the German-controlled and fortified city of Vitebsk, so the Soviets did not attack. The logistics were appalling to both sides, you see. Initially, it seems the Soviet political and military command did not realize the possibilities the gate created, as the real contact with the local partisan units was not established until March of 1942. But after realizing those and aiming for the overall inclusion of the partisan movement in the overall Soviet strategy, and for the disruption of the German rearguard in the event of the anticipated German 1942 offensive, a resolution had been made, supposedly in March of 1942, to create steady logistical and personal support for the partisan movement and to maintain centralized coordination of its activities. Dina Shmiriev, the daughter of the famous partisan leader Minai Filipovich Shmiriev, mentioned how important these Vitebsk gates were to Stalin. And I quote, "In the summer of 1942, he received the leaders of the partisan movement in the Kremlin, among whom was Minai Shmiriev. There is even a painting by the Soviet artist Modorov, Partisans at the reception of Stalin. Minai Shmiriev was invited to see Stalin the next day. The commander-in-chief shook hands and asked to tell him about the state of partisan affairs. Old man Minai Shmiriev said that he got to Moscow through a corridor in the front, that is, through the Vitebsk gates. Stalin demanded to see a map, and after Minashmiriev showed him the location of the such gate and told him that in the Suraj area the partisans had formed a partisan region free from the Nazis, where village councils and collective farms worked, supplying the Red Army with food as best as they could, Stalin was very pleased. End quote. Therefore, the flanks of these gates were now defended by regular units of the Soviet 4th Shock Army. In the north, in the area of the village of Uzviaty, and from July of 1942, the 47th Nibielsk Rifle Division took position. In the south, near the city of Velish, there were soldiers of the 51st Rifle Brigade, commanded by Fyodorov, and soldiers of the 249th Rifle Division, commanded by Tarasov. There was no continuous front along the Velish-Uzviaty road. Only patrolling was carried out by the partisans, since the Germans were not present there at all. Inside the gates, the partisans defended the line in the south with the 1st Partisan Brigade with around 2,000 people from the base in the village of Tarasenki, 20 kilometers from Velish, and in the village of Kulakovo, 35 kilometers from Vitebsk. And in the north, only around 600 people from the 2nd Belarusian Partisan Brigade defended the area around the village of Shershny, south of Uzviat, to the station of Ezerishche. The terrible Battle of Rzhev ended in a crushing defeat for the Soviets, and by September of 1942 the Germans could finally muster enough forces to implement the destruction of the gates. German forces launched a large, well-planned army operation on the night of the 25th of September of 1942. It began as a three-pronged offensive from the south, from Vitebsk to Kurina, from Suraj to Tarasenki, and westward from Kraslivichi near Velish. After meeting at the Uzviacha River, these forces turned north with the aim to seize the main forest belt forest road, which runs along the west bank of the Uzviacha River from the western Divina River in the south to the town of Uzviaty, via the villages of Tarasenki and Shershny in the north. There was very heavy fighting near the villages of Punishche and further north near Drozhdy. By the night of the 27th to the 28th of September, German artillery and tanks had taken all the villages. German forces from the north cleared the Veliki Luki Uzviaty road that night, launching a synchronized 10-kilometer long southward strike along the Uzviacha River towards the village of Shershny. German forces captured the villages around Shershny the next day, meeting the force striking from the south and closing the Vitebsk gate. They burned several other villages in a punitive expedition around the area. The 334th Regiment of the Red Army, 47th Infantry Division at Uzviaty in the north, was attacked by the Germans on the 30th of September, but held its ground. A monument to the partisans who fell in combat was erected in 1977 near the village of Zabolie. The Vitebsk Gate are an example of how a hole in the rear guard of your enemy can be exploited by the opposing side in order to develop a partisan movement behind the enemy lines. As a matter of fact, the closing of the gates did not end partisan activity, as we will see in future episodes. It can be even argued that the experience of the gates of Vitebsk was put to good use in the future. The best example would be the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Laos during the Vietnam War, a much larger and important system behind enemy lines. It grew to be up to 2,000 kilometers long with all-weather roads, an oil pipeline and communication lines. We will talk about the Partisan Republic of the Eastern Front in the following episodes. I hope to see you there. Please share, like and subscribe if you liked this episode, and if you did not, well, thank you so much for watching this far. As always, thank you all so much for watching.